finally figured out why God commanded us to rest. Because if he didn't, we'd behave just like a horse and run ourselves into the grave. Yeah, both the men who are in the hospital right now in rehab are living, walking miracles. By all accounts, they should be dead. The Lord spared them, and we have seen the hand of God moving in our midst. And my faith does not require miracles, but it sure is fun when I see them. The title of this message is Giving Honor to Some Old Friends. There are times when the cares and the obligations of this world become so overwhelming that you can actually forget the Lord. Conversely, there are times when one's desire to see the face of God more clearly blinds a man to the things that are going on in Olam Hazeh, in this world. That seems to be more of my problem these days. I just don't want to come out of my office, because on the other side of that door, it's crazy. In my office, everything is beautiful all the time. All this week I was laboring over a message. There was something I was missing. The message I was being given was not for this week. It's for next week. And so Friday morning, he gave me the message that I'm going to give today. Stephanie had given me a copy of Teachings from Zion on Tuesday. It's published by a friend of mine, Joseph Shulam. He runs an organization in Yerushalayim called Nativia, and has a congregation there, the first congregation in Jerusalem to own its own building. Another friend of mine, when I saw the cover, I knew who it was. It was a drawing, a painting of David Stern. I didn't give it much thought, and I was so busy. It was fun here this week with pavers. People were paving, and the sweet smell of asphalt wafting through the air. It was, just, 98 degrees and asphalt. Gan Eden. And I didn't read the magazine until Friday morning, when I was trying to finish the message that I had begun on Sunday. And it was a memorial about an old friend of mine, David Stern. I have to tell you, a society that does not honor its elders does not advance, doesn't learn anything. It has to learn the same old things every generation, and there's no advancement. On my first trip to Israel in 1986, I was introduced to a man by the name of Elchanan ben Avraham, and it was Eliezer Urbach who introduced us. We spent a good amount of time together over the years and established a firm friendship that lasts even to this day. Our pilpul was extensive. It covered every subject ranging in scope from science to the Bible, the condition of our society, politics, our wives, our children. You name it, we argued about it, and it was pure pleasure. I love Elchanan's artistic abilities. I was able to see his soul through his published words, his paintings, sculptures. He's a true artist in every sense of the word. But it was our discussions on the nature of Yeshua that intrigued me mostly. Our lively pilpul, these animated discussions, forced me to think more deeply about Yeshua, and I pray my words had the same effect on him. Through Elchanan, I was introduced to two men I have held great respect for from the moment we met. I have countless memories with these guys, some hilarious, some sad. Two of those memories stand out, and they come back to my mind from time to time when my heart is breaking. Joseph Shulam was intrigued by my hunger and thirst for knowledge, and so we spent an entire day together driving around Jerusalem, and I think we visited every single religious bookstore in the Holy City. I bought so many books that I had to purchase another suitcase to take the books home or leave my clothes in Jerusalem. I still have these books, and they've influenced my view on God greatly, but he passed on to me something even greater than this. We pulled into a parking spot and entered a coffee shop. And he ordered for us, Shnei espresso bevakasha. 2 espressos, please. Now, I had not started drinking coffee till I was 21 years old. I enjoyed it, but I never fell in love till I went to Israel, where I was introduced to the true nectar of the gods. Some say it's beer. I say nay. Drinking this thick, dark brew, it was a machaya. It was a resurrection for my soul. It's now the only coffee I drink. That thin, pale brown water of regular coffee, it's no longer a thing with me. I don't know why you bother. It just looks like old dishwater. But there would be greater pleasures than these awaiting me. And that day we stopped in and got some Turkish coffee. This viscous brew was leaked from heaven itself. I took a sip and I saw God. Holy water. Joseph smiled at my descriptions of this divine nectar, but he laughed out loud when I was done. I don't know if you know how Turkish coffee is made, but it's ground to a fine powder. It's like talcum powder. And you take 1, 2, 50, whatever, spoons of it, and you put it in a cup, and then you pour boiling water over it, and that water leaches the divine essence from the bean, and then all the powder settles to the bottom, and you get to drink. It's only about a half or 3/4 of an inch of this. Truly, the coffee has a viscosity. I think it's like 30 weight. And I had finished my Turkish cup, and I put these 2 fingers into the cup and took a pinch of the grounds and put it between my cheek and gum, and I was good for the rest of the day. I mean, and he laughed. He just found that hysterical. never mastered the art of Turkish coffee. I think it's the brands that we get here in America. It's got caramel in it, and caramel is an invention of the devil.
Yeah.
Yosef and I shared many conversations about God, about life in Israel, and especially as life in Israel as a Messianic Jew. And I'm going to share one of them in his own words. He had an interview with a man by the name of Tuvia Polak, and he described this encounter. Now remember, I'm going to be talking about Messianic Jews, believers. It was in 1972 that I met Moshe Emmanuel Ben Mir. At the time, all Hebrew-speaking congregations, which is a euphemism for believing Jewish congregations in Israel. If you're a Messianic Jew, you go to a Hebrew-speaking congregation, it's referring to Messianic services held entirely be'ivrit, in Hebrew. There are some that are in English, but that's what he's talking about here. Went to a Hebrew-speaking congregation of believers, and they only used this blue book with over 400 traditional Christian hymns translated into Hebrew. Ben Mir was the translator of those hymns, and he had published a book by himself. However, he was not allowed into any of those congregations that sang the songs he translated in that book. Wasn't allowed. And again, it's believers who were not letting him in. Shalom, Yosef describes his contact with Ben Mir. One Shabbat morning, Shalom recalled, I went to the congregation with my wife and our baby, and I noticed a Haredi couple. Haredi is ultra-Orthodox. And they entered the congregation. He was dressed in a regular black hat and robe. He took off the hat and he was wearing a kippah underneath. One of the elders at the entrance smacked his head, took off his kippah, threw it on the floor, and said, you don't enter a church with your head covered. The old man picked up the kippah from the floor, shook it, put it back on his head with tears in his eyes, and he left. He went out and sat at the bus stop crying. I, Yosef Shulam, went after him and sat down with him. I realized that this man wrote the hymn book. This is when it first came to his mind. This is Mir. He wrote the hymn book that all the congregations use. And at that moment I understood that for the sake of the future of the faith in Israel, this anti-Jewish, anti-traditional attitude must stop. And that inspired Yosef Shulam to a life of revealing the good news of Yeshua to the Jewish believers who were being rejected by the church. And the only reason they were being rejected was they walked in the faith of their fathers. You know, it's like sometimes Messianic Jews feel like a red-headed stepchild.
Yeah, with the hair look.
You know, nobody likes me. Everybody hates me. It's a very strange phenomenon. Yosef was quite young when he sat down with a believer and was having a conversation. He was raised in the north in an atheist home, and when they were done, you know, he seemed to be open. The guy said, "Would you like to be baptized?" And Yosef said, "Sure." and he went through the water at the mikveh. He came home. His mother asked him, "Where you been?" He said, "I've been with so-and-so." And she says, "Oh, did you get baptized?" And he said, "Yes." And she said, "Gather your stuff, take whatever you think you're going to need, and get out." His mother and father threw him out, and he was on his own since that time. He taught himself much. He went to many different schools, received many degrees. Brilliant man, actually speaks many different languages. Very astute mind. He went through a great deal to proclaim the name of Yeshua. Lost his family, lost everything. Many years later, he and I stayed in touch over the years. I was blessed when he called me here in America, and he said, "We're changing. Nativia is now going to change the name of the congregation, and we want to call it Roy Israel. Will you give me permission to use that name?" And I said, "Oh, well, first, you don't need my permission. Secondly, I'm honored that you would ask. Of course, the answer is yes." Now, on that first trip, I attended Nativia, as it was called then. Like I say, they were the first ones to own their own building. It was 86. And while I was there with Elchanan one Shabbat morning, I met and befriended a very intriguing man by the name of David Stern. He was soft-spoken, he was polite, genteel, somewhat aloof. And those are the words that I used to describe him. But it was obvious to all, his waters ran very deep. We shared a number of interests. One we didn't share. He was a surfer. I never wanted to be a surfer. I don't like the ocean. That's why I'm living in landlocked states, far away. The idea of being the low rung on the food chain is not to me a good idea. And I can't even see the things that are nibbling on my toes. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but seaweed and shark skin feel exactly the same. One of the activities that we did share a passion for was mountain climbing. He was an avid mountain climber. And we discussed the perspective one is afforded when sitting atop a peak, looking out over what appears to be a sea of white caps, encrusted, waves that reach all the way out to the horizon. And just, we sat for many hours just talking about that paradigm, that perspective. Looking down on the civilizations below, gave us a point of view that you can't get from the flat looking up. You see things different. And we shared very similar feelings in these experiences we both had. He climbed the Teton in Idaho, where I used to live. We shared about what that experience was. He earned his doctorate in economics from Princeton University very early in life. He was brilliant, like I say. He skipped a number of grades and went on to earn his doctorate. And I remember he desperately tried to share his passion on that subject with me, but he ceased when I fell soundly asleep while he expounded some of the more subtle nuances of this remarkably boring subject. I keep looking at Dan because whenever I'm tired and need a good sleep, I go in to the Board of Trustees meeting, and as they discuss the finances, I'm asleep in seconds. It's cathartic for me. It's wonderful. He also received an advanced degree from Fuller Seminary. On one of my many trips to Israel during her many wars, I stayed at his home. Now, David comes from old money. He is one of the Los Angeles Sterns. I had to pay a royalty to even say that phrase. His parents owned the home literally at the corner of Hollywood and Vine, prime real estate back in the 50s and 60s. He moved to Israel, and he built this beautiful mansion. And it provided a respite from the tensions experienced just beyond the beautiful gates, the cascading vines that dripped down the stone walls, the percolating fountains that reminded me of Engedi, cool shade of the various fruit trees. They painted this place in the hues and textures of the garden. It existed in stark contrast to the desolation of Manahat, the old Arab town that surrounded it. When he first moved there, Manahat, totally Arab, he bought some land on a hill, and built this place. Now it's a thriving Jewish city, but back then, just desolate, except for this jewel sitting on a hill. And here he paid me one of the greatest compliments I've ever received in this life. I was outside early one morning and I was spending time with God, and I had brought my fiddle with me this time, and spent a long time just sitting on a piece of Jerusalem stone that had not been hewn, and just playing, going places wherever my soul, my heart would take me. And when I was done, David stepped out from the shadows of his encampment where he had been listening, and he said, "That was extraordinary. I saw your soul." Well, those words fetched a briny drop for me. He was a musician himself, clarinet player, piano player, played a few other instruments. We spent the next few hours discussing music, and we agreed music is not about notes. It's about exposing one's soul to God and whoever might be listening in the shadows. I also was able to see David Stern's soul in one of the worst, the worst situation I ever found myself in. When my beloved first wife got cancer, my insurance would not cover an autologous bone marrow transplant. I had to come up, do this in the hospital. It was going to be $150,000, and I looked at the nurse and said, "Do you need to see an optometrist? Do you see who's talking to you? They melt me down for parts and sell everything I own, and I don't have that." She says, "Well, you could do it at home." "How much at home?" $86,000. David Stern gave me a rather large sum of money towards that cause. I will never forget that generosity. David Stern died in 2022. Many remember his contributions to Messianic Judaism, which were many, his scholarship, which was deep and insightful, his intelligence, which was extraordinary, and also his ruggedness, quite an athlete. But personally, I remember his compassion and his love. That I will never forget. The knowledge and experiences of these men that I have mentioned have given me insight into the words of Yeshua. In this world you will have trouble. David Stern was confined to a wheelchair in his declining years. The once powerful legs and determined mind that propelled him up to many a peak gave way to the ravages of age. I hardly recognized him last time I came by his home and saw him in a wheelchair. But his faith in God, in the God of our fathers, never waned, even for an instant. And I am quite certain he heard the words, "Well done, true and faithful servant. You've been faithful in a few things. I will now give you charge over much." I pray that I'd be privileged to hear those same words when I'm called home. Reading this magazine caused my mind to wander over the course of 40 years of ministry. And the people I've gotten to know, many of them were elders of the faith. And each of their experiences has broadened and deepened my faith in God. Here in America, I knew and worked with Eliezer Urbach, a great evangelist for the name of Yeshua, and the one who began this congregation. Through him, I was introduced and developed a deep friendship with Moshe Rosen, who began Jews for Jesus. He was born on the west side of Denver. The Lord used him to bring tens of thousands of Jews to a saving knowledge of Yeshua. Moshe would also help in gathering funds for Sylvia to get that bone marrow transplant. During my tenure as the General Secretary of the UMJC, I was privileged to attend a meeting of the International Hebrew Christian Alliance in Toronto. These men and women will forever be etched in my memories. I attended with an agenda. I wanted to start a second Jewish alliance in America. Never been done before. I wrote a constitution, and I came loaded for bear. God had another agenda. What emerged from that meeting was a tenuous peace between the Union of Messianic Jewish Congregations and the International Hebrew Christian Alliance of America. The overt animosity of these groups subsided, and we shared times at each other's conferences, and it was pleasant. However, for me, the most profound times were shared with the leadership of this group. It goes way back. These men and women lived through the Nazi bombings during the siege of Britain in World War II. And I listened to the stories that they had to tell, and they regaled me with stories of how they got Richard Wurmbrand. Does anybody not know who Richard Wurmbrand is? He started a group called the Underground Church. It was the International Hebrew Christian Alliance that bribed the Romanian authorities and got him out of a communist prison. He was in there for something like 14 years, and him and his beautiful wife, Sabina, was separated. And daily, his feet were beaten. He would eventually come here twice. And it was such a machaya. He was a Lutheran pastor, but the dancers here, they beguiled him. And he put his tallis on because he was born and raised as a Jew. And when he saw the dancing, he came out, and he was pretty stove up. You know, feet don't fare well once they're beaten with rods. And he was dancing gingerly in the center, and all the dancers were dancing around him, and I'm sitting up here playing the fiddle going, this is cool. You can come back now, Lord. You know, I don't need to know anything else. This I've just seen everything I need to see. He'd also mentor this young rabbi on each occasion. I learned much from him. The stories about worshiping God in the tunnels of the underground transit system while London was being bombed inspired a young rabbi. They were possessed of the same faith as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Their faith in God was unshakable. Nothing could dissuade them. This young rabbi's faith would not be tested in such a fashion till the time of Chag HaSkadot, the Feast of the Scuds in Israel in the 1990s. When 500-pound bombs fell all over Israel, when children and adults huddled together praying in the Cheder Hatum, the sealed rooms, when the artwork of the children, which adorned the walls of the Hotel Bahar, shared a common theme depicting bombs and rockets falling on the city, of buildings in rubble and ruin, of injured people bleeding in the streets. It was Purim when this was going on, or coming up to Purim. A time of great joy in Israel, yet this is the artwork of the children. This is the artwork they'll remember. A man's faith is one thing. A man's faith under fire is quite another. My faith broke a bit during that time. And the voice of a loving God blew the breath of life into me once again and revived that faith. I was staying with Avi Mizrahi for a time, and his beautiful wife and children, they had just had a baby, and the babies couldn't get the gas masks on. Gas masks were utilized because we didn't know if there was going to be sarin gas attached to these scuds. We knew he had them, but he used them on the Kurds. But we had no idea would he use it on Israel. So we're all sitting in the room with the gas masks, but the neonatal, there's no gas mask that could stay on. So they were put in these cellophane tents with filters on the sides to protect them in case there was some gas. And the baby is crying. She's separated from mama. She's touching the baby's screaming. And mama's crying. She's touching. Sitting there. And as I watched this mother weeping and watching the infant girl in the plastic tent, I became angry with God. And in the isolation of that gas mask, I cried out, Hayeka, where are you? Why are you allowing this to happen? And in a very strong voice, expressing a bit of frustration sprinkled with just a touch of irony, God reminded me, you're not the first one to ask that question. I was. You hid from me. It was me who wandered in the garden, calling out to you, Hayek. One of the object lessons of this message: don't get angry with God. You're not going to like the response. And then the testimonies of these various men and women who suffered the violence of Hitler's minions came back to my mind. And as they arrived, then the peace that passes all understanding emerged in the midst of the time of trouble that men seemed to suffer through. Here's the whole thing in a nutshell. We all have our own demons, our own fears, our own sets of anxieties that hinder our walk with God. No one is free from these things. Let not your heart be troubled. Here's the good news. God will bring all those hindrances to you. You can run, but you can't hide. The Lord will bring them to you that you might face them head on, and He will show you the way around them, over them, or through them. If you haven't had it happen yet, have a seat. It's coming. In all ways, in all situations, Adonai Shama, God is there. He sees and He hears everything. And that knowledge gives us the strength to press on, as those English folk used to love. They loved that statement, press on. Yeah, we were sitting there, and you know, much better English accent than I just tried to pull off. And we had to press on, and it's the strength to take just one more step when everything in you is depleted, when you're done. I pray I have brought some honor to those who came before me, those who have labored tirelessly in the faith, those whose work we continue to this day. These workers are worthy to receive honor. Many of them have finished the race, and remaining faithful to God, they have gone home to glory. Many others have not been called home yet echo the same prayer as Rav Shaul, Apostle Paul. Having led so many to a saving knowledge of God, may I not fall short myself. Even so, come quickly, Lord Yeshua.
Amen.
We so long for our husband. He's been going along peace, but the rejoicing when he returns. And he's coming with Turkish coffee. I'm just saying. Father, in Yeshua's name, we thank you for the promise that you do not leave nor forsake us. You wandered with us in the desert. You've wandered with each of us in our lives, in hidden places, in public places, in this world. Let us ever be mindful that you are just on the other side of the veil, right on the other side of the Arafel, is the glorious and luminescent face of your presence. We long to behold you, Lord. Come quickly, in Yeshua's precious name. Amen.